Thank you everyone for joining our webinar today. My name is Dominic and I work on Amazon's Selling Partner App Store. As you may know, the App Store is a one-stop shop for sellers to discover and enable more than 2,500 trusted apps to help you grow and manage your businesses. We are continuing our webinar series today with a presentation on how to streamline your accounting with Intuit QuickBooks Online. Throughout this session, we encourage you to submit your questions through the questions tool, and we will be answering them in a live Q&A session following the presentation. Today, we have Seth David, who is the president of Nerd Enterprises, Inc. He is an accountant who has partnered with Intuit QuickBooks on many projects, including national ad appearances, and he specializes in e-commerce accounting, specifically with QuickBooks Online. You can find Seth's videos on his own YouTube channel, as well as on Intuit's, and he is also a regular contributor on Intuit's Firm of the Future website. Without further ado, I give the floor to Seth.
Thank you, Dominic. Appreciate that intro. All right, perfect. So as Dominic said, my name is Seth David, and I'm an accounting professional who specializes in e-commerce. As an accountant, my job is to protect the assets of my client. Now, what this means is I need to put checks and balances in place to make sure that there are no mistakes and everything's been accounted for. As an example, I've got a client who found a mistake by analyzing what we commonly refer to as his COGS, C-O-G-S, which stands for cost of goods sold. He would analyze his COGS, or cost of goods sold percentage, and looks at it month over month. And when he saw a big spike in that number, he found and corrected an error that actually would have cost him a lot of money if he hadn't been doing that kind of analysis. So let's talk about why this matters. I mean, besides the obvious that he found and corrected a big mistake that would have cost him a lot of money. The truth is, many small business owners think that the only reason for doing accounting and bookkeeping is to get a tax return done. And the reality is, getting taxes done is just a small part of why you need reliable accounting and bookkeeping. The real answer is you need data, right? Data is critically important, and I just gave you an example, a very concrete one, of why. You can find and correct errors that will save you money. You can also do analysis that will help you make a lot more money, perhaps, than you already may be, okay? Now, for an e-commerce business, data is your most valuable commodity. You have to know what's selling and what isn't. You have to be able to get insights as to why something is or isn't selling. And you need to get that data not just quickly, but practically in real time, which means you have to also be on top of what's going on in the world and on top of things that are happening that will impact your business, right? You're selling in a competitive environment where everything from logistics to rules and regulations are dynamic. For example, changes in sales tax legislation, which is happening fast and frequently these days, can impact your business. Luckily, Amazon does an amazing job of handling this for you, but if you sell on other platforms, then you'll definitely want to take a look at that, right? Let's talk about your suppliers. Do you have a backup plan in case you need a new supplier? Can you find one who can deliver the same product for less? Can anyone do it faster so you don't have to worry about stockouts? These are some of the questions you want to think about. Then we can talk about products. When you factor in all of your costs, from purchasing to logistics to other selling expenses, the question, of course, is, are you still profitable? Can you analyze, in other words, do you have the data needed to analyze your profits by product, or SKU? SKU, by the way, stands for stock keeping unit. For years, I heard people throw that term around and didn't understand what it meant for sure. And then finally one day I got the bright idea to Google it. And I was like, oh, that's simple. So SKU, stock keeping unit. And when we're doing that kind of analysis, of course, the question is, which products are profitable, right? Which products have a good profit margin, but maybe aren't selling a lot of volume? So we can identify those and exploit them so that we can look for ways to increase the volume. That's often going to mean maybe spending some more money on advertising to get those products selling more, right? And the more we sell, the more volume we sell on a high profit margin product, the better that hits our bottom line or our net income for any given period, right? And then we can look at which products do we need to purchase well in advance to make sure that we're stocked up for the holidays or any other important part of our business cycle, right? We have to look at the kinds of products we sell and what things happen during the year that might impact, where those products sell. Overstock on inventory, and it can cost us money because we're paying for this product to sit on a shelf somewhere, under stock, and we can lose sales due to stock out. So there's a lot of inventory analysis that we'll want to do in order to figure out what is the optimal quantity to have on hand of any given product, and how far in advance do we need to make sure we're ordering it so that we have enough of what we need when we need it, right? Now let's talk about some more numbers. What's in the numbers, right? The only real way to see the answers to these questions is in the numbers. And the only real way to see the numbers is with the right accounting reports, right? So these are the questions you have to ask yourself. And Amazon is super detailed. At the end of the day, you need to know how to get from the gross amount of everything you sold during that 2-week settlement period and reconcile that with the net amount that landed in your bank account. In between, there's fees and reserves, and I want to talk about some of that stuff now. Now, years ago, in an effort to clearly understand, how to get it, I had my first e-commerce client, frankly, and I was looking at his settlement report that you can download from Amazon Seller Central, and it opens up in this text file. You're going to see an example of what I'm talking about in a few minutes in case you don't know what I'm talking about. But I opened it up and I said, wow, I was overwhelmed with the amount of data that was in there. On one hand, that's a good thing. It means I have a lot of information that can be useful. On the other hand, I needed a way to organize it so that I could understand it, understand how to interpret it. And most importantly, I had to understand it so well that I could explain it to my client. So in an effort to understand clearly how to get from gross sales to the net deposit, I dropped that flat file into Excel, and I actually created what's called a pivot table. And then I built it out into a template. Now, in order for this to work, I had to build out some detailed tables. And again, you'll see an example of this in just a minute. One of these tables' purposes was to map the different types of Amazon fees so that I could consolidate how I wanted to report those in my accounting. I didn't want every single, little sort of commission or shipping related fee separately in my accounting. I wanted to group those into broader categories and report on them so that I can give my client something that would be really easy for him to analyze and understand what to do about it, right? So I wanted to report those in my accounting. And in order to do that, I spent a lot of time studying the fees, learning what they meant. And for me, it boiled down to a few major categories, right? So let's take a look at what some of those categories are. And this is how I wanted it described in QuickBooks, right? In a minute, you'll see the larger detailed list of what you get when you download it out of Amazon. So we had Amazon Capital Services. We have the commissions, of course. We have gift wrap. We have goodwill, handling fees, inventory adjustments, inventory removal, the reserve that I mentioned, and we're going to talk about that one. Then there's Amazon restocking fees, the sales themselves, what we actually made from selling the stuff, right? And Amazon shipping and Amazon storage fees. So in order to, sort of reconcile all of this, I created a table that looks something like this. I've got it split up on 2 halves of the screen so you don't have a really long thing to look at. But on the left column is what comes out of the Amazon settlement report. And this is not everything. This is just what I had encountered up to the point that I had created this. And on the right-hand column is the corresponding QuickBooks account that I wanted it mapped to when I wanted to put this together in my accounting. Okay, now, the next thing I did was I took all the data that I was able to compile using that table and actually another table that had my client's complete SKU list, his complete product list. I had to be able to look up both between how it comes out of Amazon and how we have it described in QuickBooks Online. And this is what the pivot table looks like that I mentioned. It's just a very powerful feature that Excel has that lets you take large volumes of data and consolidate it into something like you see here that's simple, that I can look at and understand, okay, in this particular settlement period, my sales were 237,000 and change. Numbers in red are negative, numbers in black are positive, right? So the black numbers are amounts that were being given to us, right? And then red was amounts being taken away. And this is how I could confirm with 100% certainty and accuracy how to get from gross to net. I could show this to my client and say, you had sales of 237 and change for the period. And the fees are what you see here on screen that go in between. And the bottom line of this is that it all nets out to what you see at the bottom right, which is 107,101.09. That is the exact amount that will show up in his bank account. And the fact that I can prove that and confirm that is a big part of how I show my client that what I have here in the details are what I describe as bulletproof, right? Every number is accounted for. There's no way anything's missing. There's no way I get from the gross sales to this number exactly matching to the penny what came into the bank without being very detailed and being 100% inclusive of everything that goes in between. It's very unlikely I would get there by accident, okay? And so again, this is how I could confirm with 100% certainty that these numbers are accurate and complete, okay? Now, let's take a look at what some of that raw data looked like. So this is what that settlement report looks like. You're seeing a piece of it in this sample client data. And you can see, I kind of circled it here to highlight it. You know, this was from December 18th, 2019, and there's that same deposit amount. And I always sort of highlight it when I'm looking at this because I want to make sure as I'm doing all the work, and there's a fair amount of work in here, to get it all mapped out and make sure there's, you know, for new products, we take them into account and so on. I want to make sure that I remember that number, that I remember to go back to that number and confirm with 100% certainty before I, for example, import all of this into his QuickBooks file. Okay, now at this point, I'm guessing some of you are going to be looking at this template that I'm showing you and wondering, you know, if you can get access to it, but I'm not going to make it available. The point of this is to show you that on the back end, this can be very complex. And as you can see from the from the dates I showed you, this would have been from more than a couple of years ago. But now let's talk about your accounting software. Okay, so again, I'm not going to give you this template, even if you want it, because by the time I'm done, I promise you, you're not going to want the template. It's just to illustrate the complexity of what's sort of going on behind the scenes. Okay. So what is QuickBooks, and more specifically QuickBooks Online? Many of you are very possibly already using QuickBooks or QuickBooks Online, and some of you may not have heard of it before. It starts with the balance sheet and the income statement, okay? And then it goes much deeper. How profitable are your products? Are there some that should be cut? Are there some that should be selling more? Are we matching up shipping costs properly with what we are selling in the same period? What I'm giving you there is a phrase that sums up what you've probably heard people refer to. If you've got somebody doing your taxes, you've probably heard them talk to you about this. And what I'm driving at is the difference between what's called cash basis accounting and accrual basis. Okay, generally speaking, inventory-based businesses, almost by their very nature, have to be accrual. There are exceptions, and it's very possible, maybe even likely, that many of you file your taxes on a cash basis. And all that means is that just says that we don't recognize income until it's been paid, and we don't recognize an expense until it's been paid. So it doesn't account for things that are sort of in transit, right? If I happen to have the kind of business where I'm invoicing customers for products that I'm selling them, the income from those invoices isn't recognized until the customer pays. Right. Now, what accrual basis refers to, and going back to that last question, is accrual basis, what it tries to accomplish is the objective of matching things up in the right period. So if I have income in this period, and I'm looking at that COGS number, that cost of goods sold number, what I want to confirm is that everything's being matched up, that the cost of goods sold that I'm recognizing based on the inventory that I sold, it matches up. It's from the inventory that was sold in that period. In other words, if I sell something this month, I don't want to recognize its costs in the following month or the previous. I want everything matched up because then I can get a really clear picture of how well my company performed, right? I can get these financial statements, the balance sheet and the income statement, which is also called the profit and loss. They tell me two essential things. The balance sheet is a snapshot. It's a moment in time, and it lets me know what the financial position of my company is at that day. Commonly, you'll look at your balance sheet at the end of the year so that you can get your taxes filed. So December 31st would often be the cutoff date of that balance sheet. But of course, I tell my clients to look at these statements every single month, even more often, because as I said earlier, with e-commerce in particular, but really almost any business, you want to be looking at stuff in real time so you can act quickly and make decisions and react to things before it becomes a big problem, before it costs you too much money, and for sure before it's too late, right? So it starts there, and then it goes much deeper. At some point, somebody's going to ask you this question. Your CPA, somebody from a bank that you're maybe looking to get financing from, an investor, right? Somebody's going to want to know this stuff, and you should be, not that you have to have an accounting degree, but you should know your numbers enough to be able to have a discussion with whoever it is that's asking for it. And obviously, it should be an intelligent conversation, right? Where you know what you're talking about, you know your numbers, and you can answer with confidence, especially if you're looking at potential investors. So if you're selling products on Amazon, and especially if you participate in the many online forums that are out there for Amazon sellers, then you've likely at least heard of QuickBooks Online. If you're not, you're already using it. And again, the question, what is QuickBooks Online? Simply put, it's accounting software that runs in your browser. And for Amazon sellers, I can tell you that you want accounting software that was built to work with other online applications. Many new businesses don't think about this until it's tax time. And then you need to get a tax return done, and your CPA or your enrolled agent will ask for a balance sheet and income statement. And that's about the time that you'll get that deer in the headlights look if you haven't already, if you're not already prepared for this. And that's often the time where people panic and say, oh, we need to get somebody who can put our books together for the whole year, and now we need it done quickly. And quickly is often not clean, not bulletproof, like I mentioned earlier. Okay. Now, as I mentioned, Amazon charges different fees across many different categories, and they also hold back some reserves, which many Amazon sellers do not account for properly. So the question is, are you looking at this? Are you reconciling this to make sure you show clearly on your balance sheet how much of your money is in that reserve account? Right? I've looked at clients' books where they completely ignored what this was. They booked the reserves to Amazon fees, but they're not fees. This overstates your expenses and it understates your assets on your balance sheet. Why? Because the reserves are money that Amazon has held on to, I imagine, to cover for various things that they may need to cover, returns, chargebacks, what have you. And then little by little, they'll release funds out of the reserve. So each settlement period, it can go one way or the other. Some periods they take money back, other periods they release more money to you. So what that account represents is a portion of your money that Amazon is holding on to, and some of that money, hopefully all of it, eventually will be released to you. So it's important to look at this from a cash flow standpoint. This is money that isn't in your hands yet, but it will be. It's also money that is included in your sales that you don't get right away, right? So it's important to understand these implications. The cash that's not in your bank yet, we're talking about the balance sheet. Instead, it's sitting in reserves. We're hoping it will all move from reserves to the bank account, right? Less whatever things they may need to take money out of it to cover, as I mentioned. And then on the profit and loss, we have income in there. We have sales that we recorded that we haven't been paid on yet because we're waiting for the reserves to release. So hopefully that helps clear up what the reserves are. I make a big point of this because I see this mistake happen all the time, right? So again, just to recap, it's important to understand this from a cash flow standpoint. You've got money out there that, and it's, in a manner of speaking, belongs to you, but hasn't arrived in your bank account yet, okay? Now, some of what I'm saying here, it might sound like a lot of technical accounting stuff, right? And you may be wondering, do I really need to know about this? Do I care about this? But as I mentioned, let's say you're looking for funding from, if your business, from either a bank or an investor, they will care about this stuff, right? And you'll need to be prepared to talk about it with them, as I mentioned. So what I want to do now is I want to show you something that's going to simplify this because, like I told you, I'm not going to give you that template. That template actually was a lot of work for me to maintain, and I built it so that you didn't have to know a whole lot of Excel, but you definitely have to know some Excel. And I'm going to show you an answer to this now that will convince you that you don't need that. Not only don't you need that template, this is going to be so much better on every possible level. All right, so let me bring this down onto my screen. Okay, and this is what QuickBooks Online looks like when you first log in, for those of you who aren't familiar with it. And on the left, you have your main navigation, okay? But what I want to direct your attention to here is this menu item down here. It's called Commerce, right? Now, once you've set up QuickBooks Online Commerce, all of the above, everything I've been talking about so far is automated and super simple. So today I want to show you exactly how you can do this seamlessly with Amazon. And here's how. Like I said, on the left, you'll find the Commerce menu. Now, if for some reason you don't find this menu in your QuickBooks Online account, all you have to do is reach out to QuickBooks support and let them know that you want the commerce feature, and they will get it added for you. And they'll turn it around quickly. They're very good about this. When you do that, if you need to, they're going to need your company ID. So I want to show you how to get that up on your screen. You're either going to need it in a chat support, or if you're emailing, whatever format it takes on. When you're in QuickBooks Online, you're going to press Control Alt and the question mark. Okay, and Mac users, I think it's Command Alt and the question mark. And here's your company ID. So anytime you have to get on with QuickBooks Online support for anything, they're going to ask you for this number. As you can see, I can click copy here, and then I can close the screen and I can paste it into chat, email, whatever it is I might be using to send it to whomever I need to send it to. Okay, so again, if you don't see this option available in your menu, then reach out to support, send them the company ID, and they'll get it turned on for you. I imagine by now most people have it, but these things I think are sort of rolled out regionally, so it's possible that not everybody has it just by default available. Now, when I move my mouse over the menu item, you'll see the 3 pop-outs. You can also just click Commerce, and it's going to take you to the first section. We call these tabs across the top, and you'll see we have the same 3 here. So we have the overview, the orders, and the payouts. And this is what it looks like when there's no data in there, nothing connected yet. So I want to show you how easy this is to get it connected. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is click up here where it says Connect Sales Channel. Then we're going to choose Amazon. Okay, and it's just going to walk us through step by step. It really couldn't be simpler. Okay, now here's an important point to stop on. It's asking us how far back do we want to go. So I'm using sample data here, of course, so I'm going to leave it at July 14th, but keep in mind that in your case, you may want to go all the way back to January, because you may have data going back to January. I'm assuming that last year's stuff is already done, and so that you're not needing to go back any further than that. But if you need to, it's as simple as just setting the right date. The important thing here is just stop and think about this and think about what is the right date that we should be putting here, okay? Then I'll scroll down a little, and I can confirm and click agree. And then it asks me to select my marketplace. And then I already took the time to log into my Amazon Seller Central account previously, so that I didn't have to start logging in at this point. It just found me because I'm in the same browser session in another tab and I'm already logged in. I have to confirm that I'm giving the app permission to access all of the data. Okay, and now here I have to do some sort of back-end stuff. And what I recommend you do, if you're not super familiar with your chart of accounts and what accounts you want things to go to, you might want to have another tab open. That's one of the beauties of working in browser-based software, of course, is I can have multiple tabs so I can be in different areas of the product at the same time. And this way you can kind of browse your chart of accounts in a separate tab to make sure, where do I want the funds to be deposited when the money comes in? So for that, I want the Amazon funds deposited into my bank account. So we're going to do Wells Fargo 1597. And then the fees. How do I pay the fees? Well, I want those to be deducted out of the same bank account, right? So when the settlement period closes and a few days later the money drops in, it's going to go into this account. And if there are any fees that need to be taken out separately, then they will be taken out of this account. Remember, most of the fees are deducted before you get that settlement, but there are some things that Amazon may need to take out separate from the settlement report. And so that's what you're telling Amazon to do here, or QuickBooks rather, you're telling it to book that stuff to this account. And next, just waiting. Almost there. And next. And it's confirming everything's been added. And let's go. Now we're back here, but I can see that I have Amazon connected, right? It'll give it a name. Amazon US3 is because I did this twice before just to test things and make sure everything worked the way I expected before I was preparing for this. And you'll see here that it's still showing nothing because it's a sample company and the data goes back a few months. So in the last 30 days, there's nothing to look at. But if I change this to the last 12 months, now I can start seeing the revenue per channel. Okay. Over here, again, last 12 months, orders per channel. And then I can look at top selling products here. Again, if I change it to last 12 months, I can start seeing that information. Now, of course, if you have a very active and current channel, in the 30-day view, everything is going to come up for you right away. And the idea here, as you can see, is to get a very quick overview of some of the high level and very important information that you're going to want to be on top of. And this is a dashboard. So the way I like to think of a dashboard is just like when I think about the dashboard I have in my car, right? I don't want it to be overwhelming with too much information so as to be distracting. I need to get a quick picture of how fast am I going and how much gas is in the tank, right? And so I want to think of this as the financial equivalent of that, right? The revenue is kind of like how fast I'm going, right? The top selling products and the number of orders I'm getting, we can think of as, gas in the tank. Of course, the other metric to look at that I like to equate to gas in the tank is how much cash is in the bank, right? So these are the three areas: overview, orders, and payouts. Let's take a quick look at the orders. This is really straightforward. It's going to give me the list of all the orders. Over here, it shows the channel, so you can see the data actually from the previous connections I made. You won't have this. Obviously, you're only going to do this once. And I can click into any of these to see the details. So here's my sales order date. It confirms which channel I'm in. It confirms that it was paid. And if I want to see exactly when and where this was paid out, I can click View Payout. And it takes me into that. It shows me, excuse me, it shows me that it's included in a payout for a total of $9.99, right? Here are the sales that were included. And then I can look at the expenses. In this case, it looks like it was adjustments that were made in my favor. And then here's the adjustments, and it's broken down by month. And these are from the reserve. So that's how I can reconcile the activity with my reserve account to make sure that, my amount should agree with what Amazon says it should be. And if it's ever not an agreement, then of course I have to dig in and maybe start running some more detailed reports and try and understand what, where we might have gone off, right? So you can look at the orders. Over here, we can take a look at refunds, right? So we can confirm what refunds were in there. And then payouts is what we just sort of drilled over to from the orders, but here we can see it very clearly. So again, looking at Amazon US 3, which is the connection we just made, this would be the payout on September 29th, view details. And it shows me the payout is $518 for just the one order that we had. And it's not even from an order. As I expand, I can see it's actually money that's been released from the reserve, right? So there were no orders this settlement period. Again, we have sample data, so it's we don't have $1 million in sales here. But that's basically the overview. And again, the beauty of this is that you don't have to worry about all the mapping and table building and stuff I told you about earlier. It's all just done for you. Everything is, once you make the connection, you'll see what I've just shown you here. Yours will probably be a lot more active than my sample is. And you'll be able to quickly get in and start analyzing your sales data, which, as I've been saying, is the most important thing. You don't want to be spending time compiling this stuff. You want to spend all your time analyzing this stuff so you can determine, as I said earlier, what's selling well, what isn't. You can get to the bottom of why something may not be selling well, and then ultimately, what products should we cut and what products should we be looking for ways to make efforts to sell more of. And that's all, folks. Commerce makes it super simple to track your Amazon sales and expenses, research orders, get your books bulletproof so that when you do need to explain your financials to anyone for any reason, you can have confidence in your numbers and speak intelligently about them. And I'm just going to skip past this because this is all what you've just seen on screen that I had included in my presentation here. And if you have any questions, of course, we'll stick around. We purposely reserved plenty of time for questions here. And if even after this you have questions, you see the URL on my screen where you can get in touch with me. And if you want to get QuickBooks, if you don't have QuickBooks Online yet, then use that link, intuit.me/Amazon sellers, and that will take you to where you can get more information and a special offer for QuickBooks Online subscription itself. And that's it. Dominic, I'll hand it over back to you so that we can answer any questions that have come in.
Thank you so much, Seth, for the insights. I thought this was a really fruitful session. A bunch of you have submitted questions, so hopefully we'll be able to get to as many as we can. The first one would be, can I create purchase orders with QuickBooks Online?
So the answer is absolutely, you can create purchase orders, and I highly recommend it, especially for those of you who might be purchasing products from overseas. And here's why. Let me explain why, and I'll make this quick because I know we have a lot of questions, but this is an important one. I'm glad somebody asked this. When you order overseas, most of them, if not all of them, are going to require you to pay upfront, probably in full, before they'll even ship the stuff. So that's money that went out your door for products you haven't received yet. And if you create a bill, which is a transaction that will reflect, it will assume you've actually received the inventory, it's going to inflate or overstate your inventory levels, which could cause you to end up running out of stock, even though you thought you had enough. By using a purchase order, it's basically a placeholder. It's what's called non-posting. It doesn't impact your inventory quantities, doesn't impact anything. It's just a placeholder that says we've ordered this stuff. Then you can book the payment you made as what's called a prepayment. That's too much to go into for today, but there's plenty of videos. I have videos on it that will teach you how to deal with prepaid inventory. Then when the inventory arrives, you turn that purchase order into a bill and you apply the prepayment to show that you don't actually owe the money. And now your inventory quantities will be increased on the right date based on the fact that you now have the inventory on hand. So the quick and succinct answer is yes, you can and absolutely should use purchase orders in QuickBooks Online.
Wonderful. We got a couple of questions about, is there like a way to bring QuickBooks Online information to QuickBooks Desktop or Enterprise?
So there's not a way to sync the data if that's what we're talking about. If you're using QuickBooks Desktop and you want to switch to QuickBooks Online, the migration process is very easy. It's literally a few clicks, and you can first you go set up your QuickBooks Online company, and then from within QuickBooks Desktop, it's right in the navigation to convert it to QuickBooks Online. It'll have you log into your QBO company and confirm the company that you want it migrated to, and usually in less than 30 minutes, it's all set up. You'll get an email confirming. One tip on that is run your balance sheet and P&L before you do the migration and get a snapshot of that. Then when you complete the migration in QuickBooks Online, run the balance sheet and P&L there, make sure it agrees. It 99% of the time will, but just in case it doesn't, you'll want to troubleshoot that, and then if need be, do the migration again. You should be able to confirm that the balance sheet and P&L agree 100% at the moment in time that you've done the migration.
Excellent. We have a few questions about cost of goods sold, or COGS. Are they brought in from Amazon? How do you enter those? How do you record those in QuickBooks Online?
So your purchases are going to be recorded in QuickBooks Online. Amazon, as far as I know, doesn't track that for you. There's no process in Amazon Seller Central. I think Amazon Seller Central really just deals with the sales side of it. So what has to be done, and there are inventory management systems that are very detailed that plug into QuickBooks Online if you need to be very detailed about tracking, because there's the raw cost of goods sold, which is what you actually paid for the product. But then there's what we call landed costs. So the shipping that you pay to bring the products into your warehouse, right? And some people want that absorbed into the cost of their inventory. So when you're getting a little more sophisticated like that, you're gonna, and this is the beauty, as I mentioned earlier, of using software that was built in the cloud to work with other apps that run in the cloud. So you can use these other apps to do that detailed tracking. They'll let you create the POs, which will sync over to QuickBooks Online, and they'll let you identify where the landed costs are and how to allocate them and absorb that so that your cost of goods sold is as accurate as it can possibly be.
And I know you touched on inventory a little bit. We have a group of questions that are kind of around, how does QuickBooks account for inventory costs, last in, first out, first in, first out? Is that also through other integrations, or can you maybe talk a little bit more about that, expand on that, please?
Sure. So it's a great question. First of all, you can track inventory in QuickBooks Online, so you don't have to use one of those apps. And if you do, then all your purchases go in. You have to identify each item that you purchased, the quantity of each, and what the unit cost was. And then QuickBooks calculates the cost for each order. And then here's the distinction between how Desktop handles inventory versus QuickBooks Online. Desktop uses a weighted average cost for your inventory. QuickBooks Online uses FIFO, which stands for first in, first out. And the idea of that is when you're in a period of rising costs, that's going to kind of optimize your cost of goods sold, because the older stuff is going to be the lower cost stuff. So it'll show that you're more profitable until you sell through all that inventory and then get into the inventory that you've purchased more recently. The idea is to try and make it more accurate when overall costs tend to increase.
We've got a few questions about the reserve amount with Amazon. Does that get posted to a sales expense account? How does that integrate?
Oh, great question. So it's an asset account, right? Because as I was saying earlier, it's money that really belongs to you that Amazon's holding on to just in case, right? So as such, it's an asset account. An asset account is money on your balance sheet. It's something your owner have rights to. So that reserve is an asset account. It's on the balance sheet. It's not on the P&L. And then as it's released, it essentially transfers from that reserve account into your bank account. So it's moving between two accounts on your balance sheet.
And does commerce work for both FBA and merchant fulfilled orders?
Yes, it does.
Great. And do you need to have separate integrations for every marketplace that you're in on Amazon, or is that all integrated together?
So it's a separate connection. When I showed you how to create the connection in Commerce and QuickBooks Online, I had to choose that I was in the US marketplace. So if you have marketplaces in other countries, if you have Canada, Mexico, anywhere else, each one is going to be a separate connection. But then the beauty is in Commerce, it's all going to be consolidated. And I didn't show you this, but in those screens, there's actually a filter. So when I'm looking at that data, I can filter it and say, just show me this one marketplace, or I can say, show me every marketplace. So the answer is each one is a separate connection, but I can chisel the data down to just the one connection that I might want to look at any given point in time.
Got a few questions about if they've maybe used a different third party in the past to put in the data to QuickBooks and then they reintegrate it with Amazon now in that direct link. Are there duplicates? How does that work? Do you have any idea of if there's a way to dedupe that information?
So yeah, that's where that date that you set when you're in the setup process is really important. Ideally, what you'd want to do before you connect Commerce, if you've been bringing this stuff in manually, is bring it to a date, like the exact date of a particular settlement period that ended, probably the last one that ended, and then set up Commerce as of the following day. So that should eliminate probably the chance of duplicates. If you end up overlapping, you can't really edit the data that came in from the Commerce connection, so you'd want to edit the data that you might have created manually before the point when you made the connection.
And is there an app for QuickBooks Online? That's a question that we have.
There is. Anna, maybe you can help me with this, because I know that the app, from what I remember, it was changed that the app only works with QuickBooks Online Advanced. There's different levels of products with QuickBooks Online. There's Essentials, there's Plus, and then there's Advanced. And if I remember correctly, the app only works with Advanced unless that's changed. I think, I know at one point it used to work with them all, then they made it just Advanced. It may have changed back. I honestly can't say for sure. But there is an app that works on your desktop.
There's another question here is, how far back can you go with data import from Amazon?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. That's why I mentioned during the setup that most likely you would have any prior years all done and tied out and in for tax prep, so that you would just connect it as of January 1 of the current year. I'm pretty sure it will go back, at least a year, but I can't say for sure. This is a very new product, so I'd have to check with my friends at Intuit, to be honest, to confirm exactly how far back it can go.
Sounds good. And we have a few questions about how to connect credit cards to QuickBooks Online. If they're using credit cards for either payment inventory purposes, what does that look like?
So it's exactly the same process as for bank accounts. So you go into the banking area and you'll choose to add a new bank account, and in there you'll be able to select credit cards as well. During that setup, it's going to ask you to log into that bank or credit card account. Once you've made the connection between QuickBooks Online and the bank account, it's going to take you back to a dialog, not unlike the one you saw in this setup process, where it's going to ask you if you have an existing account in your chart of accounts that's meant to be used for that credit card. If you don't, it will let you create one. And then you'll also have a similar date that you enter, telling it how far back should it go to download the transactions. One important thing to be aware of in this process that's not necessarily clear, I've seen a lot of people kind of get tripped up on this, is whatever date you go back to, QuickBooks will also, if it's a brand new account, it will figure out what the balance was as of that day in that account, and it plugs like an opening balance entry. And a lot of times I go in and delete that, because what I really want to do is kind of force that to agree with whatever the last statement was before the day that I downloaded. And it's just going by whatever date we downloaded it as of. If it happens to be, the first day of the next period, then it might be right. But my point is just double check that and make sure that that opening balance that gets added in is correct. If not, delete it and you can create your own opening balance that agrees to the statements.
We have a couple of questions about if QuickBooks automatically pulls in each report, or do you have to request it to pull that information?
So it actually pulls them in. It will pull in the information daily, but it doesn't post until the settlement period has closed. So in those screens that I showed you today, you'll be able to see all the orders coming in every single day, and you can do that analysis. They come in as essentially what are called sales orders, which is kind of the sales side of a purchase order, right? So again, it's non-posting, but you can look at the data, analyze it, and make sure everything looks okay. And then once the settlement period closes, within a day or two of that, it will actually post all the entries and all the expenses from that settlement report. And that's a way, I believe, of making sure that everything does reconcile 100% perfectly between the gross sales and the net deposit. And in case somebody's asking this, because I would want to know, because a lot of times the settlement report will span 2 different months, it will actually post things on the appropriate day based on that order date. So you'll have things recognized in the right period. I was talking earlier about matching things in the right period. If a sale happened in September, I want it in September. If it happened in October, I want it in October, so I can run a monthly P&L and get it accurate. Here's my revenue for that month, all the expenses, and so on. So it will post. It won't post until the settlement closes. Once it does, it will post it sort of retroactively based on the date the sale took place and the date the related expenses would have been in place.
Thank you. Do our sellers need to create specific accounts before connecting QuickBooks Online with Amazon? Is there anything they need to do there?
So it's really just the 2 accounts I showed you. You can create them on the fly during the connection process. I personally prefer to, kind of plan ahead and organize my chart of accounts to make sure I have things exactly the way I want them. And that way, when I get to that connection process, it's already there, and it makes it easier. It kind of eliminates questions. A lot of times, if I haven't done that, I find myself getting stuck. And you saw the drop down. You're kind of limited as to what you can see. So this way, if I'm looking at the full chart of accounts, and I mentioned this, if you use a second tab to do that while you're in that process, it's a really good idea. So I can just double check that I have A, the right context for where that account that I'm choosing sits in the whole chart of accounts, and B, that I'm ultimately choosing the right account. I believe if you do make a mistake, it's easy to go in there into the settings and fix it. So, it's pretty forgiving that way too.
We have a few questions about different kinds of reports and charts and graphs that you can pull from QuickBooks. What are some ones that you kind of recommend looking at as a business owner?
So always start with the balance sheet. Okay, the balance sheet is your checklist for everything, right? If you want to confirm that your books are bulletproof, you're going to start with the balance sheet. You're going to start by looking at the bank accounts and just asking yourself some very straightforward questions. Do these numbers look accurate? When I look at the amount that it says are in my bank accounts, does that look like it's about right? And of course, I can go into my bank and confirm. So it starts there. And that gives you the big picture. So you go through the whole balance sheet, you go through the whole profit and loss. You should definitely be doing that. But in terms of specific reports that pertain to e-commerce, there is if you have all the details in QuickBooks Online, then a report that I really love to look at is a sales by product summary totaled by month. So that literally gives me a grid that shows me each month in the columns, each product on the rows, and I can see exactly which products are selling, and I can see in an instant visually which ones are consistent, right? Because my eyes will be drawn to the ones that have numbers in each month versus ones that are more spotty. So it gives me a really good quick glance that acts as like a dashboard to clue me into where I need to take a closer look. The things that are selling regularly, I might be okay with. What I may be looking for are the things that are spotty. And then my question is, why are they spotty? Maybe it makes sense. Maybe these are things that only sell at certain times of the year. Or maybe these are things that, now having identified them, I can think about ways to make efforts to sell them more regularly, more consistently. Maybe it's a product that can easily be shown as a related product when when somebody buys something else that sells more regularly. That's probably the best way to increase sales, by the way, is to increase the number of times the customer buys from you. And I know Amazon does this, I think, automatically, where it will say, here are some related products. Customers who bought this also liked and it gives you those suggestions. I don't know if as a seller you can control like if others of your product can be shown, in that same sort of dialogue.
Sure. A few more questions about other marketplaces outside of the US. When data is being pulled in from, say, Canada and Mexico, is it in US dollars? Is it in local currency? Are there ways to affect that?
So QuickBooks Online does have a multi-currency feature, which can be turned on and it will do the conversions for you. However, it's my understanding that with Amazon, it gets converted for you before the money is deposited into your bank account. I could be wrong about that. I'm less experienced with the Seller Central side because I'm not an e-commerce seller. I'm just an accountant, right? But I believe Amazon does take care of the conversions for you, from whatever marketplaces you're in.
And how does QuickBooks record the sales tax?
Well, Amazon takes care of the sales tax for you, right? So if you need to collect sales taxes based on a sale, Amazon will handle all of that. So it's not money that I believe will ever touch your account because Amazon essentially collects it for you and then sends it in for you. So I guess the quick answer to that is, in the case of Amazon specifically, the sales tax won't touch your accounting because, again, it's all handled for you.
Question here about, in the beginning, you showed the list of different fees and how you categorize them. Does QuickBooks do this automatically, or do they have to create categories and account lines for those?
So QuickBooks Commerce actually does that automatically for you. You don't even have the choice to, like, if you wanted to create it yourself, it just creates the accounts for you that you need. In my opinion, humbly, it does a perfectly good job of that. The bottom line is you don't want to overwhelm yourself with details. You want to be able to look at it and quickly analyze. Here's what I sold. Here's what it cost me to sell it. And here's what I was left with in the bank at the end of the day. And so I find a lot of times some people are like data junkies. I'm personally a data junkie for a lot of things, but in a case like this, as I said earlier, you want information in real time and you want to be able to act fast. You don't want to get bogged down in too much detail to the point where you're so busy trying to analyze all that detail that you lose your opportunity to take action on that data.
Makes sense. Another question here about FBA versus merchant fulfilled. Does each transaction get recorded to each individual customer for both of those?
No, it's all going to get recorded to a single customer in QuickBooks Online for Amazon. I don't believe you would want all those customers sort of cluttering up your QuickBooks data. It's a lot, and you can go into Amazon. Amazon's got great reporting if you wanted to pull like customer level data out of it and analyze that stuff. I would, if it were me, I'd pull it out of Amazon Seller Central in a report, get it into Excel, and then I can cut it up, slice it and dice it any way I want.
We got a few questions about how this applies to Canada, and I know that this may be a little bit outside of scope as an American accountant, but I'm just curious if you have any insights on how different taxes get filtered and paid for Canada and other.
So we're probably concerned about, I forget if there's VAT tax in Canada, but there's definitely HST and GST, which work a lot like sales tax does in the US. I believe that's all handled by Amazon again. So similar to sales tax for the US, I think it's all handled, and the quick answer is I don't think you have to worry about it, but don't quote me on that because, as you said, Dominic, I'm not a Canadian.
Fair enough. Yeah, we have a few questions also about the spreadsheet that you shared at the beginning. Just wanted to reiterate that if you have QuickBooks Online, you don't need that.
No.
Right? That this is replacing that.
You don't want it. Trust me. It'll be more headaches than it's worth. This makes it so much easier.
This question is, do you need to do SKU mapping in order for the Amazon report to adjust inventory per item sold correctly?
That's a good question. I have to check if the e-commerce product is configured. I think if you have the product set up, as individual products, and when you set up products in QuickBooks Online, there's different types of products you can sell. There's inventory parts and there's non-inventory. Essentially, the distinction is inventory parts, I'm tracking quantities, non-inventory, I'm not. I don't honestly know if it's mapped based on SKU or the product name. I believe it is based on the SKU. And so you would have to make sure that your SKU in QBO matches the SKU that's in Amazon.
Can folks transfer their info from QuickBooks Self-Employed to online, or is that similar with like the enterprise where you?
So QuickBooks Self-Employed is a QuickBooks Online product, but unless it's changed, that's the one product that's kind of on its own planet, separate from all the other QuickBooks Online products. It may have changed because I don't really deal with that product very much. But last time I checked, you could not easily move it. Any of the other online products, you could just change your subscription. But I could be wrong. The way you'll know is if you go into your settings, your gear icon at the very top right in QuickBooks Online, and go into your billing and subscriptions area within the settings. If it is possible, there'll be an option to upgrade to QuickBooks Online Plus or whatever other product. If the option's not there, you can't do it. You could probably reach out to support and ask them. They may have a way on the back end to help you migrate that data.
Several folks here have more than one business that they are running on Amazon. How do you recommend reconciling that with QuickBooks Online?
So the first question you have to ask, if I have a client asking me that question, the first question I have to throw back to them in order to answer theirs properly is, are each of these businesses in a different entity or the same entity? So let's say they're all under one LLC, then it's no problem. We can download them all into one QuickBooks Online company. But typically the rule is for each tax ID number, it really needs to be a separate QuickBooks Online company. You could potentially get around that by using classes in QuickBooks Online and having each different company be a class, but I don't recommend that to my clients. It can get very messy very quickly, especially because you're going to need a separate set of reports for tax purposes, or as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, when you have potential investors or a bank looking to loan you money, they're going to want to see financials for just the one company, and it can be done, but with difficulty, let's put it that way. So the general rule is one tax ID, one QBO company. Each QBO company separately would have its own connections to whichever Amazon marketplace it is sort of, it needs to be connected to. And that would keep it nice and clean. I get that it means paying for extra QuickBooks Online subscriptions. If you have a lot, I believe it's still around. I think I just got an email the other day from Intuit that they have multi-company bundles in QuickBooks Online where you can save money on the subscriptions if you know you need a bunch of different entities created in separate QBO companies. So check into that. They call it bundles, where it was designed for real estate people who have lots of LLCs for all their real estate, but it would certainly work in this case.
Thank you. And can you use this integration just for financial tracking and not for inventory tracking?
Yes. In fact, as I was saying earlier, you have the opportunity to set up non-inventory parts, so you wouldn't track all the inventory quantities in QuickBooks Online. And in that sense, and you could even potentially just have one or a group of generic products in there. You do have to have some products, because when the sales come in, you have to be able to say, this is the thing that's sold. But you can think of them in QuickBooks Online as just categories of products, so you can simplify it a lot. Leave the inventory tracking to Amazon, and then as I mentioned, you can pull data out of Amazon when you want to analyze the details. And in that way, yes, you could use the QuickBooks software as strictly just your general ledger, so you can run your high-level financial reports and leave the details to Amazon. They do a great job. And one of my favorite things when I'm looking at any app, especially ones that work with QuickBooks Online, is what kind of data can I get out of them? Like I said, I'm a data junkie. I love when I can just get detailed data in Excel, because then I can run pivot tables like the one I showed you earlier today and really analyze that data 6 ways till Sunday without having to worry about cluttering up what's in QuickBooks Online.
And if your SKUs don't match, will this integration work?
That's a good question. I'd honestly have to check. I couldn't give you an honestly accurate answer on that. I'd have to double check because it's like when I've done the connection, it just connects up. As you saw in the process, there's no product mapping part. So I'm honestly not sure. I have to check with my friends at Intuit to confirm how that works in terms of mapping the products.
Sure thing. And when someone is adding a bank account, do you have any advice on what kind of tax form section do they select?
There should be a tax form selection for just bank accounts or cash accounts, something like that. I think it's either cash on hand or checking in the detail type. The truth is, unless you're using an Intuit tax software product, it's not that important. But at the same time, I always tell people, find the most appropriate response, because you never know. You might decide, hey, this is the year we're going to use Intuit Tax Online or something, and then you'll definitely want those sort of chosen properly.
And this might be more of an Intuit question than just QuickBooks Online, but is commerce available with QuickBooks Online Plus?
I believe it is. I believe it is. I don't know if Anna can kind of confirm that for us in the chat.
We can wait on that one. And I know we're running out of time here, so we might just have to answer the rest of these questions later on. But I'd again like to extend a sincere thank you to Seth for presenting today and sharing your deep expertise on Intuit QuickBooks Online and how to integrate that with Amazon to streamline accounting. I enjoyed hearing from you, and just based on some of the comments and questions that we received, I know many of our selling partners did as well. So thank you again, Seth, and look forward to seeing everyone next month at our next webinar series. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dominic. It was a pleasure.